Greetings, folks, and especially greetings to the ESFJ resemblers, or the people with ESFJ preferences, the extrovert of feeling type, with subsidiary, i.e. auxiliary, sensory instincting, as I call it. So, I try to improve the arrangement to sort of break up the... Anyway, you shall see what you shall see. So... This is, I only did it for FE because I didn't want to do the whole profile just for a graphic, because I wrote, it was about 13 pages when I did the SFJ. So if you take that in, although I'll probably read it out as well, in case you're on a small mobile device. So here we go. This is core FE, in my opinion. And I'll move it like that. Besides food and shelter, to the collaborator guardian, that's ESFJ, friends, family, and lovers are most important. FE, within the context of the guardian temperament, is expressed as a concern for conventional morality, manners, the done thing, and a general consideration for other people, especially their feelings. All guardians are beneficent, acts of kindness stroke charity, except SFJs, ESFJ and ISFJ, not only take the biscuit, they are most likely to give you one along with other provisions. At times, the world of the ESFJ can seem like a network of mutually dependent obligations, but the ESFJ will feel bad if it becomes dependent on others. Preference for sociability, very good social skills, reputation important. In my humble opinion, Ernst Kretschmer's jolly organizer refers to ESFJ. Get things going in bounds. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my first digression of the evening. The jolly organizer reminds me of the character of Gladys Pugh, Chief Yellowcoat in the holiday camp. And there she's reminding him there are certain rules and regulations. So the Janus is coming out there, the S-Janus, and of course commenting on Gladys, right? That's a bit of the FE, a bit of the era, 1950s era. Well, it's set in 1959, 1960. And then you're too conscientious, Gladys. Oh, I'm an ESFJ. Of course I'm conscientious. There. So, and here's interesting, this character, in that she's a sexual too. So got a really strong sex drive, but she's got that conventional morality of its time. There. I couldn't let that lot see. I'm Chief Yellowcoat. So, care about her reputation. FE considerations. There you go. Any more evidence? There are campers out there not being organised. I'm the jolly organiser. Making them enjoy themselves. That's ESFJ. Make them enjoy themselves. I don't know why I've got that in there twice. It's in there twice. It's going to delete that. Right. As Chief Yellowcoat, how can I maintain discipline amongst all those girls? Discipline. And then this is to an ESTJ. Apologies to ESTJs. ESTP character. War hero, aviator, flew a bomber. There you go. You're just irresponsible. Because responsibility is a key word for guardians. An ESFJ being a guardian. I'll get back on track, but I just want to show you the Gladysness. There you go. There's the FE, like she's beaming there because of that acceptance that ESFJ wants. And like very much attentive to the sort of like the feeling data being given off. That empirical feeling data. At the end, wanting harmony, why at each other's throats. And then literally, and this is in the Bones' profile of the ESFJ, that they are literally happy for other people. That when other people are happy, the ESFJ is happy. There, so sour, like in the positive emotions. All those yellow coats have to be kept in order. Again, you've got the guardianness there. So you've got the FE with the guardianness. And the things with this character was probably based on a real person, because they said in an interview that all the main characters in Heidi High were based on real people, because both co-writers worked in a holiday camp. One worked in Butlins, the other one maybe worked in Pontins. There. Now, the build up to that. The luckiest thing that ever happened to Clive was meeting me. Without me, he'd just wander aimlessly about, just having a good time. He's a 7. But I'm going to channel him and get his nose to the grindstone. So there's your guardianness there with Gladys. An ESFJ of a particular era. And very good performance there by Ruth Maddock. So let's go back to FE assertive. You want to get an idea of, I'll do it, you can see that. I'll try and get it to the side, try and get it all in. Right, FE assertive. So that's a rather extreme example. It's just an example to show how the ESFJ can change by cultural context. Could become a religious supremacist if adherence to a supremacist religion is the social or subcultural norm. Righteous indignation frequently shown. Will comment on actions of others, especially by its own children, by how their behavior lines up against conventional standards. At home, its children are quickly praised for good behavior and chided for bad. Feels angry if its child's bad behavior in public shows me up. Because ESFJ feels its kid's behavior indicates its parenting ability. Right. FE creative. Yeah, very facially expressive. And then there's a bit where... Right, I won't go into that. I was going to mention a plot point in Heidi High, but better off to watch it yourselves. Very facially expressive. Very good at reading the affect display, especially micro-expressions of others, and it changing and or creating the emotional stroke feeling state in others by its genuine warmth and sympathy. Introjects, takes into itself the feeling states of others, which changes its own mood and feelings, happy when others are, good at entertaining guests. Then I'll show you a male ESFJ after this. FE harmonizing. Good at adapting to the needs of the group, but also by stealth, leading others by getting them to cooperate and to want to do what the ESFJ wants them to do, which is what it sees as best for the group. Now, I'm going to give you a male ESFJ. I hope it's in here. There we go. I just think this is ESFJ a lot. The way I see it, there's only 3 kinds of people in this world. Bad ones you follow, and ones you need to protect. So you've got the judginess there, the EJ judginess there of ESFJ, the protective part, and then that guardian following part. You've got the judginess, the protection, and the following of like the guardian that's looking for an authority. What have we got here? You can tell a lot about a place by how they treat their people. Again, focus of attention. FE. How you treat your people. On that level of FE and SI. Literally treating other people. Beneficence. This one. A kid needs at least one person. There you go. That protective nature. Right. What's this? The ESFJ's brain. Right. That's just a little bit of fun, and we'll go over that later because I don't want to. I want to get a wriggle on. So that should be like that. So we got that first slot, and it in the model you got 3 factors at play. If you look in the top right, slot 1, it's valued, it's default, and it's club function. So what that means is in ESFJ, FE is a club function because it's feeling and sensing are preferred, and it's valued, and its default is an extroverting function within an extrovert. It's the number 1 function in ESFJ. Also, from a Keirsey point of view, if we're talking about role enactment, then if we look at sort of like the theory of, and we'll try to remember this in every single video I do in this series, that in Keirsey he makes a distinction between type and role. Now, he doesn't make that distinction often enough, and the way the book is laid out, he needs to really ram it home, because the people who have misinterpreted Keirsey by saying, oh, he's talking about stereotypes. No. What you've done is you've misinterpreted the roles for the type. Keirsey is not saying that all ESFJs are suppliers. He's just saying that ESFJ is good in that role. Or that, say, ENTP is good in the role of inventor. Because, but even if we apply functions, we can say the role of inventor draws on NET and TI, and those are the 3 top functions in ENTP. So it's hand and glove. Type is the hand, role is the glove. Now with ESFJ, what you have is, now from a Keirsey point of view, you've got the role of supplier, which is a informing role, and it's a logistical role, and it's an expressive role. And the reason why ESFJ can enact that role well is that the type is a guardian with logistical safekeeping usually is the number 1 Keirsey intellect, and that logistical safekeeping correlates to SI with FE and SI with TE. And so you're actually providing for the physical care of others. So SFJs are good in nursing, good in hospitals, good as GPs. My own GP is my own general practitioner is ESFJ, which is very nice. And logisticals, and so the type is expressive and informing. And so it's, if someone's naturally expressive and informing, and the role is expressive and informing, then it's sort of like hand in glove. It's not a stretch to enact that role. And this is where you get the idea of natural predispositions towards certain roles. So you saw there with Amos Burton, he's naturally protective, even though he was a bit of a mobster and a violent guy. He's got that predisposition there. So, and the other roles would be a more of a stretch for ESFJ. So, say the role of contending inspector would be the biggest stretch, because even though it's got SI in there, like, it's not going to be the favorite thing in the world for ESFJ to like do the accounts and do the books. Like, they've got the discipline with the SI, but it's like there's not a lot of people, there's not a lot of like the people component in there in order to satisfy ESFJ. Now, that supervisor role, that's actually the role that Gladys is in when she says that she's the chief yellowcoat and she has to instill discipline. So she's enacting a role more typical of ESTJ, but she's doing it as an ESFJ way. So yeah, and then so from a cognitive point of view, if the player role is easiest to enact, then it's going to be protector. Like, it's still with people, it's still social, it's just with one person one-on-one. Then the inspector role is furthest away because it's sort of like impersonal and it's directive. And so this would be like doing the accounts, doing the books. That'd be a bit boring for ESFJ, although Guardians have an extremely high boredom threshold. Like, something has to be really, 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 really boring to bore a Guardian. Whereas artisans, and especially E.S.E DOMs, are very easily bored, especially EPs. EPs are the most easily bored. As am I. I'm not ADHD though. Right, anyway. So that's something on the role enactment. And then, something here where, because we have some other SF roles. I'm just mentioning this now in case I forget later on. Where, okay, so you've got as a Guardian, best at logistics, then tactics, then diplomacy, then strategy. These can sometimes move around, but definitely best at logistics and usually strategy last. And then here, provider, then protector, then supervisor, then inspector. But I mention this because of the way Keirsey divided it, and I agree with the way he divided it, is because instinct is so important that there is a big difference between SE and SI, and that you got that Keirsey didn't have. He had NF and NT, but then he had SP and SJ rather than SF and ST. Now, and that's with the MBTI dichotomy. The way they do the JP based on the top extroverted function. But my point here is that you've got ESFJ enacting these roles. I can see ESFJ in the role of performer, especially with that creative FE that I mentioned. They can entertain to get that love from the audience. Trisha Helfer might be ESFJ. Trisha Helfer might be ESFJ. She played 6 in Battlestar Galactica Mark II. Composer? Well, actually, the real Rena, and the Rena character in the sitcom, and Rena in the stage play linked above, is based on a real person. And she was a lyricist. So there's a real life example of an ESFJ enacting the role of composer. And she wrote poetry and before she went into songwriting. So there you go. There you go, a real life example. Right, that was my first experience of duality. Now then, anyway, I'm INTP, I don't give personal details. Right, so let's go on to the next slot. Oh, just a little bit more on FE there. So there's more FE in general, if you want to take that in. Do I have to expand it? It should be sharp enough. Right, what we got next? Right, yeah. I'm going to talk about default row because we've got that where you've got all of these going across. That they're all default functions because they're extroverting functions within an extrovert. Oh, yes, that's the right one. I just wondered if I got the explanation all wrong. But no, yes, they're all ES types. Because, yes, this explanation differs depending on whether it's the extrovert or introvert, because I did 2 profiles. So what I'm going to do is zoom in. Okay, default row is default operating mode. So here we go. This you don't really need to know. Again, default operating mode in the extrovert is extroverting, i.e. empiricalizing, externalizing. So this basically means that every superfunction, I call them superfunctions, the Jungians will call them functions. Now, your proper Jungians will sort of frame it as 4 functions, 2 attitudes. And I call them the superfunctions. So thinking, feeling, instincting, sensory instincting, and intuiting. Because you've got to put the ings in there because they are cognitive processes. So I'll just read through this. For extroverting types, I don't say extroverted because that makes it look like it happened in the past and it's a process that has completed. No. This is a human being, and it is the extroverting type describes the person whose default operating mode is towards extroverting. And ESFJ can also introvert. It's a dynamic. So for extroverting types, the default operating mode is, you guessed it, extroverting. This means the type defaults to extroverting, i.e. directing attention outwards towards action in the world and empirical data, such as immediate sensory instinctual data. Bullet. No, not bullet, asterisk. Instinctor. Disgust, sexual attraction, excitement, fear of spiders, snakes, etc., shows the sensory is bound up with the emotional reactions and an impulse to habit or impactful action, E.S.E. Keirsey's artisans, E.S.E. wheelhouse, seeks stimulation and are audacious and adaptable, whereas the SI wheelhouse types are seeking safety, security. See chapter 2 of Van der Hoek's conscious orientation. The limbic system reacts to sensory input before it reaches the neocortices of the sphere of feeling and thought. Latter includes perception and recognition. This is our evolutionary heritage. So I'm just going to do a bit on... no, I'm going to stick to the order. All right. So going back to the black paragraph. Social customs, morality, body language, especially facial expressions and tone of voice, signifying feelings. So all of that is empirical. Social customs are empirical. It's written about, it's there, like you could do studies on it, it's like empirically there. Morality is empirically there, different from ethics. Ethics is personal, morality is conventional, it's from the society. Body language, facial expressions, and that's across cultures. Paul Ekman's research, facial action coding system. He was the person who advised on Lie to Me, that series with Roth in it, British show player. Right, facts, numbers, practical application, TE. The world as possibilities, connections between ideas, situations that can be articulated, debated, any, because there, it's discussable. So it's all empirical. It's going towards the empirical. And then I talk about Dario Nardi, where I sort of built on this a bit, because I couldn't fit the whole thing in, but it's roughly in line with that. He basically said something like, introverts can do all introverted activities well, particularly the basic ones. So it's like an introvert is not going to be bad at any introverted function. They can do all the introverted functions reasonably well. And of course, they're going to do their first well, very well. So you're not going to get an INTP that's terrible at, we shouldn't get an INTP that's terrible at FI, because the reason why is that most of the feeling that the INTP has will be coloured by their subjectivity, and so then most of the feeling that the INTP has will be FI. Now, it's not going to be valued, because the FI as the INTP was going to want to stay in rationality, stay in thinking rather. Right. Okay. So subjectifying. Extroverts are comfortable doing many extroverted activities. Slot 1 best, so that's going to be FE in this case. 3 well, that's going to be SE. Well enough. No, 5 is well enough, so 5 is going to be NE, and 7 is get by development, TE. Yes, TE is actually going to be very good in ESFJ because for FE reasons and temperament reasons. I want to be a responsible member of society. TE, the sort of like the function that's used a lot at work. Or when you've got a workplace environment is TE value on. Well, what does the ESFJ want to do? The ESFJ resemble wants to fit in with the corporate values and the work values. And if the atmosphere at work is TE, they're gonna adjust to that atmosphere for FE reasons because they're focused on other people. So ESFJs are likely, very likely to have a 9 fix in their trifix and to have a 2 in there. Highly likely to have a 2 in there. So, and extremely unlikely to have a 4 in there. So they're going to do what is best for the group to please the group and go along with the group. And usually the values of a corporation are going to be in line with responsibility and hard work and sort of like guardian values. Now, if an ESFJ found itself in a situation where the corporate environment was corrupt and was sort of like screwing people over, then the ESFJ wouldn't be happy with that kind of environment. And so it would not be happy with that. So, for example, there was something about a memo of a certain American car company where it was they sort of ran the numbers and they thought, oh, it would be better not to correct the error in the car. We'll just let people die in car accidents. And this is me as a libertarian saying this. So, and the ESFJ, and I would have been annoyed about that. Like, oh, so you made a card. So they ran the numbers, how much it would cost to change versus how much they would be sued. So, yeah. Yeah, so that sort of thing would like ESFJ would be, because again, protective. If they found out that, say, a company had skimps like that on health and safety, for the sake of that, they would go against that, I think. They wouldn't just accept that. Like, yes, there's the corporate values, but ESFJ really is a protective type. Now, so that's an example of how somehow the FI of the ESFJ will manifest. It's going to be very much affected by the temperament values. When the environment around the ESFJ is at odds with its temperament, that's usually how the FI of ESFJ, because that's their internal feelings that's coming from their internal temperament. So if they're in a sort of an environment where, I'll get onto this later actually, slot 4. Yes. Oh yes. And then about passive and active extroversion. Yeah, it's going to be mostly active. It's usually passive in the introverting type. Right, so next. Okay, we have gone through this. Yep. Right, wheelhouse. Yeah, it's a wheelhouse function as well, FE. This is the top two. This is the in your wheelhouse. Because I tried to make the names of these slots colourful. So, strong correlation between Jungian types, 2 wheelhouse functions in slots 1 and 2, and the top 2 functions best suited to helping out the Keirsey's role. So again, as I mentioned before, an FE and the SI. Again, there, ISFJ is highly concerned with attending to the physical needs of other people, especially as well. So what I want to do with this is, if you pause this and read this, then you can sort of see what's going on. So I don't get slowed down too much, and also that's more about ISFJ than ESFJ. Speaking of SI, now we're in how ESFJ uses. There's a hole in your life. I need to come back. Now let's have a look at this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on screen, zoom it in, so you know that this is subjective instincting or subjective sensory instincting. And I'll make it about as big as I can. And I'll leave it there so that you can pause it. If you pause it, please, and then you can read it when it gets smaller. And I'm going to zoom this bit in. Conservative safety first viewpoint. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Opposite to want to improve it, them, NI. Right. Well, except if an ESFJ sees someone as irresponsible, it's like, oh, they've got to grow up and improve themselves. But that kind of thing, which is conventional, that people need to grow up. They need to, and it's like Jeff says, that guardians think that artisans eventually will grow out of it and become guardians. But yeah, I just noticed that they do, if they think someone should be responsible, but that's a little bit of a, maybe I need to write that there in future, but that's a little bit of an exception to that rule, where guardians, they sort of want everybody else to be guardian. Like, everything would just work a lot better if everybody followed the rules and was nice to each other and turned up on time and did what they say they would do, and the world would be a much better place. Now, that's sort of goes along with that. And ESFJ would also think that, would also probably think that there's not enough love in this world and there's not enough consideration for other people's feelings and active care for our fellow human, that sort of stuff. So again, SI, see those subfunctions, because this was the big problem with SI, where you've got these three different ones, especially that harmonizer. As Jeff says, guardians will tell you about their medical problems. So that comfort sensing aspect is really in these providers with the supplier and the protector. So it's like the supplier, well, what they're supplying? Well, they're supplying food. The SFJ will make sure you're well fed. And then the ISFJ is that predisposition towards someone's health. So they make good nurses. As do ISFPs. ISFP is probably better in an emergency room stroke casualty situation. They call the ER in England casualty. I did a little thing there. And then the assertive SI. So again, if you take that in and like, because I don't want, I've not got that much time. Right. Right, situational. Right, so this is when does ESFJ use, when does the ESFJ resemble introvert? So again, it's a model, or we can say the most accurate thing of the way of framing it is, well, really the most super duper accurate way to say it is like this person who has ESFJ preferences. Or I would say resembler. Because you can always stick that at the end if you forget. Right, so I'm going to spare for a moment. So again, situational mode, situational introverting. So I'll read through this. Situational operating mode in the extrovert is introverting, i.e. subjectifying, internalizing. And then there, SI is not as internal as the other introverting functions. However, certain subfunctions are, e.g. SI imaginative, sensory imagination. Yes, guardians absolutely love description in novels. And this is a typing point. Ask them what they think of it. So, for example, My mother loved the all that sensory description in the Song of Ice and Fire novels. Like other people, like the intuitive types, it's like they find that boring. All of the description of clothing and all of that. But for the Guardian, I've asked other Guardians, and I've asked Guardians online and elsewhere, like they love the description in novels because it's evocative for them, because they've got that sensory imagination. Compared to the personal row, okay, SI is not as internal as the other, however, certain stuff SI harmonize. Yeah, internal bodily harmony. Oh, and SI harmonizer. Right. Yeah, those are sort of internal, yeah. Right. For extroverting types, the situational operating mode is introverting. Right. And then, yeah, compared to the personal row in Victor Glenker's Model G, the situational row is less specific. It can include the personal, e.g., the ENTP resembler Wilma Twindley in my stage play and sitcom upcoming. There'll be a few scenes of it this year. The first scene, although you won't actually see Wilma in it, because those scenes aren't going to get recorded until next year, but you will be able to see Laura in it, and Laura's ENFP. Played by an Estonian actress by the name of Miriam. ENTP resembler Wilma Twindley in my stage play Wilma is introverted as she plays and reflects in soliloquy, but that's beside the point. And it's while she reflects that she accesses her weakest function, FI. However, the situational includes something the personal does not. The idea that certain situations draw on certain faculties, which are as opposite vertness to the type, e.g. situations which draw on the introverting functions of the extrovert. There. So that's a little bit of an error with, and I've done lots of videos on Model G, this idea that the extrovert only introverts when on its territory. But here I can give examples of when an extrovert will introvert situationally, where the situation demands it, even when it's not preferred. And another example would be, say, for an introvert, where like INTPs don't like to use E.S.E. And so within Model G, it would be, oh, well, why? It's like there's no, but it's like, but the situation of Vanderhoek was INTP. Like he described himself as an introvert of thinking type with subsidiary in intuition, but he didn't do it in English. He did it in Dutch. He would have said something like that in Dutch, or German, but primarily Dutch. Anyway, so the point is that, so we gave the example of riding a horse, and he said that he had to be an E.S.E. He had to direct his attention outwards, or he would be in danger of being thrown by the horse, because he took up horse riding again after a long break, after a long interval. So the point there, though, is that he gave an example of a situation that forced him to be in a state where the situation demanded a certain function. And so here are some examples of other situations where an extrovert is forced to go into introverting because the situation draws on an introverting function. So this is why it's situational. And this is why saying personal row is too narrow. So as then, however, the situation includes something the person will not. The idea that certain situations draw on certain faculties, that's Jungian cognitive functions, which are of opposite vertness or verting rather to the type, e.g. situations which draw on the introverting functions of the extrovert, such as when the extrovert pauses to ponder, consider how something might develop, or have a moment of inspiration from within. That's going to be quite rare for ESFJ because they've got weak NI. But do this bit, and then hit this, they'll do a lot of. Run a present experience against their storehouse of past experiences. as a way to interpret it, or pearls to search their own feelings, such as judging what mood to make in the romantic sphere, or in dilemma, where different values are at loggerheads, e.g. selling out versus artistic integrity. And this is assessed by the person as what feels right to it personally. So if an ESFJ is having a sort of a dilemma, I mean, most of the time they probably talk to other people about it, but they might be like in a situation where they really can't. And so then they're going to be sort of like the situation is going to draw them onto the inside. I have this with a character called, with the Rena character in the sitcom where, I won't give any spoilers away, but like some inner conflict will be having. So if someone has a dilemma, they're going to be forced to go within to turn it over, because that's just the nature of dilemma. Yeah, if a person thinks about its dilemma, TI by definition will also be involved. Yeah, CBT because it like they influence each other. Neuron introversion. Yeah, everyone who's introverted thinks, feels, and acts in a way that clearly demonstrates the subject is a chief factor. So basically what you're saying is there is then, basically that's like the default row, where an introvert's good at all introverting functions. An extrovert is good at all extroverting functions, really, because all of their thinking and feeling is going to be coloured by their extroverting. They're being externally focused. Yes, there's a difference between two of them will be valued and two unvalued. What's next? Right. Okay, the in your wheelhouse. So this is the same for this slot because it's the top two. Because again, here, the wheelhouse column for that. Now we're on slot 3, though. Now we're on E.S.E. So this is quite interesting because this is how ESFJ will use E.S.E. So certain features of E.S.E. it's going to use and other ones not so much. So I think ESFJ can do this. ESFJ and ESTG can focus their attention on what they are doing in the moment. They can do uptime. ESFJs can do uptime. Oh, I'm going to mention some names for ESFJ. What did I write down? I wrote down Sarah Palin, and I mentioned Megyn Kelly. I believe Megyn Kelly is ESFJ. Like she's just there, like interviewing Putin and like saying, like, it's like no fear. And then when she's there in like interviews with Bill O'Reilly, where it's being all sort of like aggressive, and it's like washes over her. Megyn Kelly. So yeah, I do think Megyn Kelly is ESFJ. Yeah. Now Tucker Carlson, maybe a collaborator guardian, maybe ESFJ, maybe. Right, in time. No, not so much live for the moment. They like to enjoy themselves with other people, but the key there is with other people. They love social engagements, but they know when to stop, when to be sensible. It's like even like the guardian child can be like quite, they want to grow up quickly. I remember Trisha Helfer was insulted when she was called a kid when she was like 33, and it's like, and she grew up on a farm, and it's like, you're a guardian, like you don't want to be called a kid because you take pride in being sensible, responsible. Right, so let's look at these. Let's see what ESFJ can and can't do with this function. It's a strong function, but it's unvalued. And I'm not going to pretend that they're great at it, but there's certain bits, certain features of it that I think they can do okay. I'm just going to rejig this. So, right. So, stimulation and attention, immersion in the present context. They can definitely focus on the moment. Yeah, they can have situational awareness, calmness under pressure. They can do, especially if it's an emergency and other people are in trouble, and the ESFJ is considering helping other people. Because again, you've got that situation where you've got a lot of SFJs working in medicine, in hospitals, and so that calmness, and especially if it's like, because the focus of attention is on other people and helping other people in an emergency, so they can do that. They prefer not to have that stress, like, whereas artisans are probably enlivened by it and stimulated by it. Force sensorics, when being protective. When being protective. Yeah. If the ESFJ is standing up for somebody, they can use the force sensorics. So they're using E.S.E as a tool, using the E.S.E for SI to protect. And even got ISFJ there called the protector. Creative. What's that? Now that, actually the thing is, the adapted to circumstances is, that's going out of, that's sort of like further away from SI, because SI prefers to like go with how it should be done, but it's not going to wreck an ESFJ. An ESFJ is not going to crumble to pieces because of having to adapt to circumstances. Their preference is for a sort of an easier life, a more stable life, but they are strong-willed individuals and resilient people. So that sort of depends on development, I think, that, and sort of like how much adaptation has the specific ESFJ resemblance done in the past, where they get trained up in terms of what to do. What they would probably do is still try to stabilize the situation, where it's like, it might be, it's not really adaptation to the circumstances, it's to try to stabilize the circumstances, to change the circumstances back to where they should be, rather than adapting to the circumstances. But that really situation really calls more for an artisan, particularly an extroverting artisan. But they're not terrible at that. And plus, with the focus of attention on other people, like, ESFJ does not have a lot of fear in it. So that's one of the ways that manifests with that third slot SE, is that ESFJ, all those ES types are not pushovers. All the ES types have got that third slot SE, in that they're an extroverting type, and they've got that sensory preference, so they're sort of focused on the world. So yeah, it's not bad SE, but there is that big difference in temperament between artisan and guardian, but they're both concrete. So I would imagine, though, that, but again, the kind of circumstantial changes that an ESFJ might meet, though, and this is just coming up with this now. So if you've got an emergency situation, again, what is the skill set of ESFJ? Logistical safekeeper, provider. So there's an emergency situation. Well, ESFJ is not going to like it and not be stimulated by it, but they've got their skill set there, their predisposition towards, right, this is how we can get these resources for this and the logistics in order to save this and solve this emergency. So there's a skill set there of logistics, of monitoring, and especially for the provider part. So say there's a disaster. If there's a natural disaster, ESFJ is going to be pretty good at clearing up afterwards and helping other people. Maybe there's a flood situation, is helping elderly people out of a house, stuff like that. It's calling upon these sort of like functions of FE and SI, and while you're doing it, you're helping other people, you're adapting to other people, you're thinking about provisions, you're thinking about how are we going to help these people survive, and the food and fuel and things like that, and that logistical, practical thinking, where you can see that how important temperament is, that ESFJ can sort of do this, because what I'm thinking about here is the kind of things which would be an emergency, and usually most emergencies involve either there's under some kind of physical kind of danger, and like I said, with that predisposition of the being good at logistics, that's a way of like dealing with the physical emergency. So yeah, that's just an example there of ESFJ adapting to circumstances, try to like bring it back to sort of normal. What else have we got? Right, yeah, club functions. Yeah, this is just because all SF functions in ESFJ, and I'll just show you something on clubs. I'll get back to that. There's a bit with Vanderhoop, just where he named them. Now, of course, he put morality. That works for SFJs, but not so much for SFBs. You've got these other names of the clubs. He was the first person to notice clubs. And now, it's not like they did mention it. Isabel Briggs in the book Gifts Differum, where Vanderhoop was referenced 10 times, quoted 10 times. And in the back of the book, it tells you the book, Conscious Orientation, and it's like, now I'm going to talk about it on YouTube apart from me and Shalina, which is bad. Given it's a arguably a better book than Psychological Types, and certainly easier to understand. I would say that there's a good case to be made that Jung's NT functions are better. There's some good little bits in Vando. Anyway, going back to this, club functions. So yeah, I edited that out in GIMP because like it depends on the type we're talking about. So in this case, it's SF club functions because it's SF type. Yeah, so you can read that there, and then I can sort of move on. This idea of, but yeah, frequently the Keirsey roles draw on the top 3 functions. So again, like I said there, with the provisions, providing in an emergency, where you can see how that in that situation some E.S.E is being drawn on. Right. Yeah, unsung allies. So this is about slot 3. Yeah, first person to write about the strength of slot 3 was Dutch psychiatrist J.H. Vanderhoop. You probably want evidence, but I'm only going to need a little bit. There. You got the NI in INTP, and you got the FE in ENFP. So there's FE, slot 3 FE, and slot 3 NI. Yeah, and this is useful. Like yourself in the world versus, so your subjective response to the world versus the actual world. It's the difference in focus of attention for the, and like that. HMS inflexible. I can't believe, like, I thought that's a Guardian sounding. And this SI man. Just read that. This sounds like an SFJ. Like, keywords, etiquette and tidiness, combi reacher. The only drawback is Amazon now suggests such items as incontinence pads and mobility aids, but I'm sure I'm glad of these time too. Right. Right. So I think this guy, like, he's a good contender to be a guardian. So again, I don't want to bend over when I'm picking up other people's rubbish. Any dom females? There's your man. Right. If you're interested in that. Right. Click on that one. Right, yeah. Third slot, yep. Oh, now I'm on fourth slot, yep. Fourth slot FI. Oh, yeah. So, as I said before, situations in which ESFJ might go into FI. Well, I sort of worked this out in an introverted way when I put myself in the center of the type when I was sort of writing out the long profile of ESFJ on typewriter. It's not worth really doing it as a CG graphic. I'll probably put it in a tie-in book if the sitcom does well. So it's be something like Women's Housemates and Model Vaserlan. I will cover ESFJ. Anyhow, the point is that FI. So this is going to be a situation in which the ESFJ's feelings are different from the feelings of those around the ESFJ. So I'm thinking, say the ESFJ is in a family and they're all sort of like, say they're all artisans. And the atmosphere around the ESF, and so the FE thing would be, I'll fit in with the atmosphere and sort of go along with it. But there might be an FI feeling of, you so-and-sos are not responsible enough. And that's their feeling, their own feeling, that it's separate from the feelings of those around them, that is in direct contrast to the atmosphere and the people and the relations that they have. But they will come out and they will say it, and that's because that FI and those values, that's coming from the temperament. So the FI of ESFJ is going to be very much affected by their temperament values. And so if people around them are not being the follower, ESFJ will be annoyed. If they're not being responsible, if they're not being kind to other people, so there are areas where ESFJ is not just going to be, as Megyn Avota calls it, FE doesn't mean martyr, and there's going to be circumstances where ESFJ and Megyn Avota being ENFJ preferences, and the EEG readings are like legit, like ENFJ. Creative subtype. Team creative. So the point there, though, is that I think the FI of ESFJ is related to its temperament. And so what it feels is right, and what it feels is right is going to come through its temperament. And so it's going to want people to be responsible, want people to be kind to other people, want people to be protective, or say it's in a situation where, say, they might live in a rough area and it's like the values around that particular ESFJ might be sort of like aggressive, but the instinct of ESFJ, and it's like, there might be a reaction, no, that's wrong, leave him alone, and be protective. And that's coming from the temperament, and that's bound up with how their FI is very much operating within the context of the guardian temperament, and that being in opposition to the environment, because usually it's not in opposition. So it's just trying to think of these examples where ESFJ is using FI and going what it feels is right. Again, I'm not going to read out these subfunctions. You can see them there. Those there. They're not people. Subfunctions. Right, this is for slot 4. And this is a bit more complicated. This is about energy. I will... So basically, I can give an example of... This is where I have a slight difference with Victor Galenko when it comes to Model G versus Model B. And Model G versus Model A is that I agree with Model A that TE is strong, can be strong in, say, INTP. And this distinction between energy and information. Okay, so we need to make a couple of complex equivalences that you're just going to have to sort of take as read for this argument I'm about to make. So if we make a correlation between information and know-how, then we could say that INTP has... So we could say ESFJ has high information for FI. And INTP has high information for TE. They're TI DOM, but they have high information for TE. But in Model G, it would say that, oh, because the INTP has very low energy for TE, they're therefore rubbish at TE. Or it would say, oh, because ESFJ has very low energy for FI, it's rubbish at FI. No, that's not the case. Because here's the thing. The more information you have for a function, when you encounter a task that draws on that function, because you have higher information, higher know-how, then you need to expend less energy completing that task. It's like when you're learning something. If you're just learning something and say you've learned it, but it's still about a week afterwards, and you've got to put a lot of effort in to still complete the task. How about 5 years later, when you then do that task and it's a piece of pie? You've got more competence. And when you encounter that task, it's easier to do. So more information, more know-how means less energy required to do the task. So when an INTP encounters, say, TE problems, it's like, it's boring, but it's not beyond the ken, I believe the term is in English, beyond the capabilities of INTP, usually. But if it's SE, it's like, more likely to be beyond the capabilities. So ESFJ with FI is they're going to have FI information because they're going to be considering other people's feelings, putting itself in somebody else's position. Now, they're mostly going to go off the affect display in the conventional way, but they are going to be able to put itself in somebody else's shoes. So this information makes the task easier. And so that's basically how that boils down to it. And with the example of, and I think I've got it in slot 4 there. Look at that. How many INTPs you got working in science? Right? Is their TE really that bad? Look at that. All that stuff that they're doing. You got, again, so, and that's your data there. That's your Dario Nardi data. So this is going to be FI for slot 4. And these are the actual, and again, is it on there? Does it say, yes, keirseycognition.com. There. 96% of subjects had their top 3 functions from the same club. 93%. 96. Right. What we've got here? NE. Right. Dabbling tertiary. Dabbling tertiary. I better get a regular one. I've only just gone halfway through. So there's Shalina. She comes back. I've been communicating with her. Hopefully she could come back on the channel in future. You have her insights. Yeah. Because she was the one that told me about Vanderhoek. You're actively exploring possibilities. Yeah, ESFJ is not really going to do this as much because it's like they have responsibilities to other people. But they're definitely going to do this if this is with, and it's fun and it's with people. The people aspect. So traveling to other cultures to meet other people. Yeah, there can be a bit of that. But there's a social aspect there. But they've still got that, desire to be responsible. So they're not going to be actively pursuing possibilities. It's the nature of the position. So if you pause that, you can sort of take it in, and then I can explain about the dabbling tertiary, the slot, and then sort of you can intersect those two ideas, the definition of the function and the slot, and then you can, from those two ideas, you can work out what it's like. Oh, why is TE there? Why is TE there? Right, that needs to be 7. That needs to be 7. I'm going to rechange that to 7. And that's about the clubs. I'll let you take that in while I change the name of that slide where it says TE. Right, that needs to be 7A. Rename. Right, so you can see that. Again, importance of clubs. Now we're on the counter club, or the counter nucleus. I'm just going to show you something about why it's sort of the way Vanderhoek did it. So here you've got one club. We got one club here. He called it a nucleus. Well, nucleus and a counter nucleus in the field of conscious oriented. This is when the type was polarized. So aware of the other club. So you got an NF club and an ST club, an NT club and an SF club. And so in ESFJ, you're going to have an NT counter club. So if we then look back at this, that's done, right? So you can see here, you notice how all these are NT functions in this counter club? NETETI, NT functions, and these are SF. So, again, counter club. This is important. I'll read through this. Slot 5, dabbling tertiary, is how low endurance. It has low endurance, hence the name. The type has more short-lived eyes bigger than its belly motivation than ability for this function. Overplays its moderate hand. It can come across as someone having pretensions for the function in slot 5, i.e. the person is not as good at this function as it thinks it is because the person does not fully commit to the function. And the reason why is because they're fully committed to their lead function. It only dabbles in it. Unless, and one of the reasons why is, okay, so you've got this tertiary NE in ESFJ, but overall they've got a sensory preference. So they're going to be in sensing more than intuiting. Right. Overall, okay, not as good as it thinks it is. It only dabbles in it, hence the name. Unless there is a non-type factor to encourage its use, especially the requirements of someone's job. Or maybe the ESFJ whose former, both parents are NE DOMs, for example. Again, the beneficiary shift. So that would be, in this case, which would be ESFJ acting like ENFP. ENFP. And I did initially think Rena was ENFP until I went through a test and I went through, right, that makes sense. That was a long time ago. That's a long time, like 2013. Right. Because I assume I was very good in typology then. It's like, well, she's creative, like she's like funny, like ENFP. It's like, no, it's creative subtype. You can get creative subtypes of guardians. Right. TI. Now we're going to get stuff with the jewel. How does this manifest? Right. So there's not going to be much of this in the Esfj because you've got that feeling preference in there, the F and the TI. Well, categorize and define. I'm not going to do a lot of that. But now, if it's with people, so if it's like a TI system like typology, ESFJ would be interested in that because it's about people, and ESFJs are interested in people. And if you could show that a typology system is useful to an ESFJ, so I think if you were to explain Keirsey temperament theory to an ESFJ, they would be probably interested. Yeah, because it's about people, and they're interested in understanding people. Integration, they're not going to do a lot of that, though. Not going to do a lot of that. It also might depend on the area. I think Dr. Julia, ESFJ neuroscientist, sort of working on sort of like the chemical level. For her, she said she wanted to get better at TI. And she admired those qualities. I think it might manifest as an admiration for clear thinking. Clear thinker. And who's going to want that sort of like Elena, ESFJ. She did some interpreting for Victor Galenko in the early events. She could call it the iron logic. She would call it TI, the iron logic. So again, the structural logic, maybe the structure, the like that clear reasoning you might be attracted to. But ESFJ is not theoretical unless it's, and like I said, if it's about people, if there's some utility in it, because you've got that again, concrete versus abstract. It is the inferior function after all, slot 6. So this is about the attraction for it. Functions in slot 5 and 6 are weak, as this is the dabbling. It's the tertiary and the inferior, weaker yet valued. Better use of these functions is respected in others. They can be a turn on. I probably did it as hot for rather than turn on, just in order to save that extra better. Make it bigger. Oh yes, and this font is called Alerta. It was designed for road signs in Italy. So it's got lovely L's in it that don't look like I's. They don't look like capital I's. I do not like Arial. The function in slot 6, that's TI for ESFJ, and the function in slot 5, that's NE, are respectively the dominant and auxiliary function of this type's dual. Oh, that's me, TINX or TINE. Complementary opposite, e.g. INTP has inferior FE and tertiary SI, and its dual, ESFJ, has dominant FE and auxiliary SI. Idea imported from Socionics, which got it a bit from Jung. Because Jung did write about, and he did talk in an interview about, say, an E.S.E. Dom being attracted toward an NI. Slot 6 and 5 can also be seen as a function map of the Jungian soul image. Look up anima animus. This is the other, i.e. B side of the personality. Dario Nardi is mentioned as inner ESFP. Right. Right. Yeah, this is still slot 6. So, because it's a bit small, I'll read through that. Right, I'm not going to read through that because that's about suggestible SE in INTJ. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. But that fourth bullet is bullet point or bullet hole. That fourth bullet hole, that was about the polarity and it can be integrated. Oh, this is about INTP. Like if FE gets integrated into INTP. And then I'll do a bit of speculation on what TI looks like integrated in the ESFJ. But where there is greater freedom of but where there is greater freedom in thought, we get a morality founded on principles and reason, capable of fresh insight into life and feeling. So that's when an INTP is integrated FE. The effect of polarity in me gives rise to an interest of feeling its relation to instincts. But I lay more emphasis on the feeling life as a sphere to itself and on the significance of morality. So yeah, I mean, Van der Hoek may have been a Christian. Now, my speculation for ESFJ in that there's a certain kind of TI that they might. I definitely think that the ESFJ is. I think they're gonna like TI when it's working with FE. Like an ESFJ is going to be interested in a system of, like you can like studying psychology, so you can have. Because again, why? Because they're interested in people. You know, an ESFJ is going to be far less likely to be interested in something like astrophysics, something that leaves them cold. But if it's theories about people and the theories work, then you can see that working. Like you've got a lot of guardians in medicine, a lot of guardians in high IQ jobs. Seriously. And I think I asked Sabrina about this sort of like the distribution of doctorates in terms of temperaments. So in terms of medicine is dominated by guardians. And also, if you think about it, the way the exam system is and the way medicine is, and like how much stuff you have to learn, how much stuff you have to memorize, guardians are well set up for memory, for memorizing stuff with that SI. They get some kind of like, there's also, I think Dario said it's like, there's that willingness to do it by rote and to go over and over and over again. And they just memorize well, good long-term memories. I'm not saying that is SI, I'm saying it's related to SI. And actually, artisans have good short-term memories. Right. I hope I don't get in trouble with Sabrina for mentioning that bit. Dr. Sabrina, I should say. Doctorate in Education. Right, I think I should move on to the next one. Right, TE. Oh, yes, I mentioned before that, so basically, ESFJ in a work environment that values TE, if everybody else wants to do TE, right, and it's not terrible, and it's not like you're going to harm people, then the ESFJ is going to go along with the TE values. But like I said, if it was a real, like, heartless values at the expense of people, like ESFJ, that FI is going to come out of here. You know? So, but most of the time, if it's like the business, because the thing is, though, there's a lot of FE in business. I've got an example for you. A motto that's very FE. Although the customer is always right. Right. And there's like building relationships with the customer base, all stuff like that. Like there's a lot of FE in business. Right. You could also say FE being used in sales as well, for rapport. Although also you can have like sort of tactics used in. Was it the golden rule of selling? Sell unto others as they wish to be sold to. Right. Pragmatic compromises, looking for consistency between facts. Pragmatic compromise. I think Esfj can do that. Right. Oh, yes. So I need to update this because this is the one that I changed. There it is. And I'll go back to that other slot in a moment. That because this was added by Kristen. So ESTJ, creative subtype, where forming a company's processes, assimilation of established practices from various disciplines, combining T and NE, and that's a quote from her. Right. So again, if it's more away from the people element, ESFJ is not going to be as interested in it. But ESFJ has a lot of self-discipline. And so if it has to do it, it will do it. Again, very high boredom threshold. Right. Again, there's something about the slot 7. Yeah, so I think all FE DOMs are pretty good at TE. Because, yeah, also FE is such a self-effacing function. It's very much, oh no, you do you, not me. Whereas FI, it's like, if FI is not happy, FI is not happy. It's like Dario Nardi did that experiment where he had an INFP, and he hooked up an INFP man, and he is chatting with a woman, and he like set it up where he's chatting with this attractive South American woman, and Dario was like looking at the EEG readings, and it's like this guy was like hot for her, like all the active, or until she mentioned that her and her family had converted to evangelical Christianity, and Dario said he had to stop himself from laughing. It's just like it was like just like the guy's interest just completely lost interest, and it's like yeah, it's quite some of the FI reactions. But again, I mean, you could have a similar situation with FE where someone had said something and it was like, if it's completely against their religion, maybe it would be, I don't know. But there's an example of just how INFPs can be fickle. Again, this slot 7, as I think, like there, this idea of, yes, that counter can sometimes be a useful counterpoint to the excesses of the lead function. And actually, when I came up with this term and then I looked it up, then I actually found out it's actually a term that's used in Investor. There, if I look for it, contrarian alternative, because they're both EJ functions. Contrarian alternative. Right, here we go. Overcoming bias. Let me just do a search for this by putting it in quotes for contrarian alternative. But I came up with the search independently. Right, so the contrarian alternative, and this is like a little bit of NE from here and like sort of giving an example of what I sort of mean here. So, while the trend may be your friend, more alternative thinking could provide a positive, says our veteran columnist. So again, it's just like the contrarian alternative where it's counters to the excesses of the function. So this would be, in socionics, this would be the role function. And I think ESFJ being self-effacing, with Fe being a self-effacing function, and that it can see the value of TE. I think particularly ESFJ maybe more than ENFJ, because ESFJ has that logistical mindset. And so the TE way of doing something, if the ESFJ can think, okay, that method gets results towards being able to, say, provide these services, then they can be on board with that because of the sort of the end results and like thinking of the like in a logistical situation. Right. It's just whether they are, because the thing is with these judging functions is they're not always in opposition. This is that insight from CBT that thinking and feeling are not direct opposites. So, for example, the opposition between thinking and feeling is actually an opposition that only occurs sometimes. And what it is, and I sort of got this, sort of embroidered this from Van der Hoop, and a key point that he made was that a key point that he made was that it is the impersonal objectivity at which thinking aims that leaves the feeling type cold. But there are situations where thinking works with feeling, where the thinking is not aiming at impersonal objectivity, and maybe the thinking and the feeling are working in synergy. So, for example, if someone is thinking through thinking through its feelings, then you have the thinking and the feeling working in synergy. And yes, there are some times where they're opposed, but they're not opposites by definition, the way the irrational functions are, where by definition Ni is the opposite of Si, because you've got Ni developing an Si stabilizer, where Ni is the opposite of Se, because Se is in up time and in time, and Ni is in through time and down time, and Ni is different from Ni by definition, where Ni you've got one sort of like singular path, and Ni you've got all of these alternatives sort of tangenting, where they are complete opposites by definition, the irrational functions, Ni, Se, Si. But with thinking and feeling, they're not always opposites, and they can work synergistically. So, and that is the whole basis of CBT, which has literally thousands of studies. And the whole premise of CBT is that thinking can change how you feel, and the way you feel can change how you think. Right. Oh, it's some stuff there about CBT. Is there anything on there about CBT? Yeah. That's just about how I did that. Ni. Weakest function in ESFJ. Right then. Okay. So, I remember David Mark Keirsey, the son of David West Keirsey, the late great psychologist, and he answered a comment from Dr. Julia, and it was about, it was on a video, and it was about NTs being planful and guardians being scheduled. So the difference between planning and scheduling. And there's also something in the Keirsey INTJ profile as well, where it's the INTJ can adapt the plan on the fly to get towards the goal, whereas your guardians are more about the process and how to get the goal. And I think Alina said that she plans 6 months in advance And if the plan goes wrong, she doesn't know what to do. So it's kind of binary, all or nothing, that position, slot 8. And so NI for ESFJ is hard to sort of use. And also it goes against the temperament, because you've got the guardian wishes to stabilize the situation. The NI wishes to develop the situation. It is this theme of developing. So I can sort of give you an example of what I mean by that. Is I need to show the table where it has the roles on it. I hope I have it. I'll be annoyed if it's not in here. What? I've not got all the table of roles in here. It should be in here. There it is. Right. It should be in here. So, right, these are the roles. These ones here, these sort of NI roles. So FENI, NIFE, TENI, NITE. These are about developer. So this is like project development. So what you're doing here, typically these roles are coordinating resources towards long-term strategic objectives. So developer. When you're mentoring somebody, a group or an individual, you are developer. So you're developing people with the NFJ's directive, because you've got the developee and the developer. So directing, changing, developing other people, seeing where they need to go. The coordinators, coordinating resources and people towards a long-term strategic objective to execute a plan on more of a level of objects and plans and systems, like the CEO of a company. But the guardians, they're about stabilizing, sticking with what works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But these are about developing. And so that's how that is different. Where am I? Hot 4 B-side disdained. So a lot of this is going to be alien for, I mean, right down there, because it's, and again, with these, like, it's not a valued function, it's not a club function, it's not an SF function, and it's not an extroverting function. It doesn't tick any of those 3 boxes. Faith and inspiration. I could have written this better. Like the spiritualism, maybe should have put instead of faith. And it's like the conviction that you get with NI. Developing, again, opposite of SI, stabilizing towards future intuitive goal. Art and guiding visible. No. Submissive, no, they're not submissive. Esfj. They sort of want people to behave well. But I think that sort of what I was saying before, that guardians are scheduled. The NTs are more planful. It's like, now there is that instance though of, and I am slightly contradicting myself, but the nuance might be appreciated. So we have here with Kristen. So, but we see there, and this is from a creative subtype of the ESTJ, and ESTJ is also weak at NI, but what is she applying is creative stimulation of established practices from various disciplines. Combining T and NE can even account for changing markets. But there she's going with what she knows, what's established. So it's not, you're not coming up with something new, something different, something that is not yet to exist. Developing towards something that doesn't yet exist. This is going with the conventional. Even with someone creative like Kristen, one of her parents INTJ preferences, and the other one ESFP preferences. And always trying to get her to think for herself. Right. What else have we got? I think I'm going to do this bit here on function 8. And then, again, those both are disdained. These disdained. So, because I've got to get a wriggle on at 1 hour 35. So I'll read through that bit in the sausage. The function in slot 8, Ni in this case, is the least valued a lot. It is the Achilles heel of the psyche, the weakest function, and the most disliked in others. Can be conflict with others. Oh, can be conflict with others who resemble a type which has this function as its dominant. Usually the type, I've had to compromise the grammar in order to fit the words in. Usually the type avoids activities which draw on slot 8. In some cases it can be binary. Yeah, like I said there, you've got all this like heavily scheduled nature that you can get with ESFJ and ESTJ. And it's like, it's when events change, they don't really know how to adapt the plan. It can be binary in an all or nothing sense. It lacks appropriate degree sense. It tends to be totally avoided or used as a blunt instrument, usually without skill. E.g., there we go, the ESTJ, ESFJ resembler who makes rigid plans for the future, showing lack of nuance and intuition of development, Ni. There we go. I forgot that was in there. Right, so now I'm going to do a bit on, oh, I should have done this before. Darn it. Yeah, so this is an example of how the irrational functions, I don't like all non-perceiving functions because it's not perception, because perception is related to thought. I'll quote Van der Hoop, since by it truth is tested. Right, so you can see here, if you pause that, you can sort of see the oppositions between these, especially if you focus on these. Like, actually change, not change as in like, oh, development. Developer. That should be development rather than change. Right, if you pause that, because that's an event in itself, and you should mention that with an event coming up with Haley. What's this? Is this about FE being objective? Right. Okay. If you pause that, the objectivity of FE. Yeah, I don't know who did these, but they're funny. Yeah, that maternal instinct. Responsibilities, yes. I don't know about that. When I first saw this, I thought, go ALS. Social status. Plans for everybody. Plans. Yes. I don't know, some of these things, these are definitely sort of misspelt on purpose rather than just by a creative person in a non-English dom country. Overall. Oh, I could have shown this, but there we go. The different slots. I could have shown that earlier on. I forgot I had this knocking around. Features of intuition in Van der Hoop's conscious orientation. Translated by Laura wasn't chained to a kitchen sink, Hilton, even though it was 1939. All the types. I wonder if Laura put them at INTP preferences. Yeah, features of values, concerned, authority, belonging, security, gratitude, executive. Thank the ESFJs especially. And then the correlates of the functions, I get into that in future. Artisans with again, this is to show that E.S.E. is more than just sensor. It's more than just sensory acuity. It's more than just having all the noticing all the submodalities of, say, all the finer aspects of each sort of sensory system. It's more than that. Like, there's this willingness to take action relevant to the moment and current situation. These are more to E.S.E. That's why I call it sensory instinctive or instinctive. It's more than just sensor. And then there's some stuff on S.I. Some different aspects of S.I. SI man, direct and flexible. Right, and being on time. Yes, I can quote you on that. Carol Linden. Okay, I'm going to pause that. Went through that. Right, if you pause that, Vanderhoop on instinct. That in orange is more towards E.S.E. Again, it's more than just sensor. Emotion is bound up. Now, because Vanderhoop did it like this, is he then said, right then, because I've put emotion in with sensing and calling it instinct, that means I can no longer see this function as a perceiving function because I've put emotion in there. And he also means that you've got to have this distinction between emotion and feeling. Feeling is more complex, more cerebral. You could say it's the subjective experience of emotion. Is one way you could define feeling. But then you could say, well, hang on a minute, isn't FE meant to be empirical? And then I might say, don't be difficult. But like, there is a way to. So an example that he gave was someone bumps into you, have this instinctive response of annoyance. You see, it's an old person, an elderly person, or a young child. Then that emotion is then coloured by other emotions, and then out of that mixture of emotions, you get something more complex, and that's a feeling. Or you could also say contrast some things like lust and love, and like the more basic sort of, and you could almost say like the more basic units like disgust and things like that. And it's like a lot of that is like, and the way that mirrors the way the brain is structured, where you've got the limbic part of the brain, and then the more sophisticated posh part of the brain, the cerebral cortices, plural because there's two of them. Not cortex, which would be one, and cortex I think is Greek or Latin for bark. Again, stuff about instinct. We went through Gladys. Oh, and then we'll finish with this. Just your differences in E.S.E. and E.S.I. So you've got emotion and motivation bound up with E.S.E. Thrill of action, exciting physical impulses, gut instincts. It's not just the sensing, it's enjoying the stimulation, seeking stimulation. With the Guardians, Dario calls E.S.I. cautious protecting. That's the essence of it. It's not just a perceiving function, is it? It's sensory instinctive. And you've got this, feel inclined to put a stop to something new to your experience. Why? Because it's not safe. It could go wrong. It's not what I'm used to. Comfortable pace, reliable, trust solutions that have stabilized situations in the past. It's conservative with a small c. What you're accustomed to, customary standard, accustomed to, safety first, the right tool for the right job in the right way. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's a much more conservative viewpoint, whereas this is more audacious, this is more conservative. That's your difference. They're very much, and Dario has said, yeah, the definitions are affected by temperament. So this shows you the importance of Keirsey, who taught Behrens, and then Behrens, who studied Jung and integrated Jung and Keirsey, and then Behrens, who taught Dario Nardi for like over 10 years. And then we sort of became equal theory partners and worked together on the business level. And I think now sort of like Linda Behrens has sort of moved into retirement and her daughter's taken over. So then, folks, that is going to be the end of ESFJ. Bye-bye.